Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of a Wild Time podcast with Adam Newsom. Thank you all for tuning in once again. Cannot thank you all enough. Hit that subscribe and like button and do yourself a favor and share all the videos. Everybody from the MMA pioneers to the horror icons. We have had so much cool content, and thank you guys for sharing and spreading the word, because it's been pretty successful. And tonight's guest is somebody pretty special to me. Everybody knows I'm a massive Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, and this guy that I'm interviewing tonight, I like to call him Clarissa Yeager's baby boy. He's a great human being, and he did, in my opinion, the closest Leatherface to the original Gunnar Hansen's. He stands 6'6", give or take 290 pounds, 310. He floats in between there. Ever how barbecue is at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Yeager. Dan, how's it going, big man?
It's going well now that we're back together. God, it's been how many years?
God, was it 2012?
I look a lot older. I know that.
Dude, you're still as ruggedly handsome as you was in 2000.
Oh well, yeah. I age brilliantly.
Man, I'll tell you what. I was just sitting back for the past week. I've been I wanted to get the right questions and just be able to shoot the bull with you, because it kind of goes way back. And I'll tell you the first thing, guys, and it's really cool because when it was announced, like, I kept up. I was really excited about the Texas Chainsaw 3D coming out. I mean, when I found out, like, I dug who they're going to have to play Leatherface, because I'm always digging online. And somehow it was Dan Yeager. It popped up, and I'm like, Dan Yeager. All right. So Google.
Who the hell is that?
Yeah. And then when I came across,
nobody.
I came across your headshot. I guess it was your headshot, and you had this chiseled jawline and hair. I mean, I was like, man, this dude.
Yeah, my first headshot was real clean cut. I looked like cop number 2, which I actually played in a friend's movie one time. Was cop number 2, but that was more my type. Back in those days, I was younger.
You looked like you were a LL Bean catalog model at the time in that one. But I'll tell you that I started digging around and I found the headshot, and I'm like, Dan Yeager. So I go to YouTube and type in Dan Yeager. What pops up is something called Hammer Time, and I'm like, all right. So is this the dude? So I hit play on this short film, and it's really like probably 3 minutes of anxiety, I would describe it as. Does that sound correct to you, Dan?
Yeah, it was a little kind of spur of the moment short that a friend and mentor, Frank Tamarello, came up with and shot, directed. He was I met him through an acting class. He was teaching and I was learning, and it was an interesting dynamic. He was brought in as a substitute for the regular teacher this one day, and it's funny, he had kind of a reputation at this acting school as being a hard ass and mean, and it was an on-camera acting class, and you're learning camera technique rather than dramatic technique. And I remember the first time I met him, basically everybody, it was so long ago, we did everything on VHS tape, and everybody would basically go up in front of the class and do their shtick, and he would record it, on your personal VHS tape that was the document of your entire class. And then he would go through the tapes and critique them. And I was one of the first ones who had to get up and do the scene, you know. So I got up there and I did my thing, and oh, you know, you always think you suck, or I do anyway. I don't know, maybe other people don't have that problem. But anyway, for some reason he just, I don't know, I don't think he did them in reverse order. I think he just started pulling tapes, and he did mine last, and he puts it in, and all through the other ones he was making comments, you know, oh, this, that, you know, oh yeah, that was good, or oh, that was Jesus, what the hell were you thinking there, you know. And anyway, he was not nearly the asshole everybody was afraid he was going to be, but he put mine in and he just played it, and he didn't say a word, and he turned it off at the end, and he said, I don't know what to tell you. You're a fucking star. And he saw something in that little dumb actor exercise. And it was a couple of weeks later, he came up to me and he said, I have an idea. I want to shoot this thing. And it was the Hammer.
Yeah.
And you know, he talked me through it. He said, this is all you have to do. Don't overact. You know, and that was it. And Lisa Hernandez is the poor victim, and there's no actual graphic violence in the thing. It's all, you know,
It's almost
psychological.
it's almost like the original Texas Chainsaw. The movie
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
almost, there's no on-screen blood, but the tension is there, and that's watching that. You're sitting in that car. I mean, it's like 3 minutes of. I mean, there's actually a little bit of a soundtrack, kind of some music
Yeah,
playing,
it's just a
uneasy
music,
music.
a real simple sound
But you're in that
drone.
car. You know, it's a hot day. You're sweaty. You're watching, and you know, your mind can interpret this short
Mhm.
film. Is that your, ex-wife, or is that a woman you've been stalking? I
Mhm.
mean, you could interpret it so many creepy different ways
Mhm.
that, when it shows you walk in and you're standing there and those broad shoulders and, I mean, menacing look, and I'm like, holy cow! All right, listen, the chainsaw is in good hands at this point. I mean, I was really happy. I mean, I was tickled to death. But yeah, I mean, if anybody hasn't seen that short film, it is
I
it
don't
is
know if it's still
uneasy.
anywhere online. I haven't seen it in a while.
It was on. I just got lucky. I seen it on
Yeah.
YouTube, and that was how I was
Yeah,
introduced
it
to
could
Dan
still be
Yeager.
up somewhere.
But after I discovered that, I reached out to you on Facebook, and I think I
Mhm.
may have been one of the first people, one of the first fans to ever.
Probably.
Because I'll tell you how, Dan. I asked you one question: how you prepared for the role of Leatherface, and like, congratulations. And you wrote out a really, really informative piece. And like, I was at work the next 2 days or something, and I'm seeing Bloody Disgusting. I'm seeing all these horror pages pop up and recite, basically put what you said. And I'm like, holy cow, man! I must have been one of the first guys that got to talk to him about
Hmm.
this. But I was thinking, Dan Yeager as a young man. When did you get into horror movies? When you say,
Um, I grew up in a little town called Columbia Station, Ohio, which is about, I don't know, 20 miles south of Cleveland, in the Cleveland television market. And back in those days, in the second half of the 1960s, there were uh, three weekly TV shows that I watched, in addition to Dark Shadows. I used to watch Dark Shadows too. Houlihan and Big Chuck, The Ghoul, and Superhost. Um, Houlihan and Big Chuck showed all sorts of monster movies, just general monster movies, it seems. That's what I recall. And The Ghoul showed a lot of the, you know, kind of edgier stuff, I guess. He was a little weirder. And then Superhost was on Saturday afternoons, and he showed mostly Japanese sci-fi. And so, I had a good curriculum of early sci-fi and horror cinema to choose from. And then, like I say, we would I watched some of Dark Shadows, the first time it aired. Most of it I saw in reruns, but anyway, it was still good, and I loved it. And yeah, and Halloween was our big thing. You know, I Halloween in Ohio is the best. They know how to do it.
Hmm.
That's the big. In that movie, A Christmas Story. That takes place in Cleveland,
Yeah.
or no, it actually takes place in where does it take place? It's not It was shot in Cleveland, but it wasn't supposed to be Cleveland. It was somewhere else, Indiana or someplace. But anyway, in that movie, you know, the kid talks about how Christmas was, the height of the kid year, and it wasn't in Columbia Station. It was Halloween.
What kind of
Christmas was
costumes
good,
do you
but
remember dressing up as when you were a
my
kid?
first my first costume was Superman. At I don't know, I was probably 3. Um, my mother thought early on I was going to be an actor, and so she encouraged that, and she sewed, so she made a lot of costumes for us. And I mean, we practiced all summer long. My older brother, he was kind of the director, and he would put together. He would haunt the basement of our house and invite neighborhood kids over, and I think we scared them.
Man, that
I
sounds
I
like a
was
heck of a
always his
childhood.
Igor.
Sounds like you had a great childhood, man. That
Oh
sounds
yeah.
just like we would do. We would always try to put together, and even my little kid and his friends at nighttime when they have sleepovers, they'll try to make a haunted house up in his room. So that's
Hmm.
a lot of the. I guess that's kind of like a Midwest culture kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was always a Frankenstein's lab and a dungeon, and yeah, we were into all that stuff.
So you moved from where was it at? Ohio to Las Vegas, Dan? Around 80?
Yeah,
Was that what it was?
1980, we moved to Las Vegas. I was still in high school, and yeah, that was quite a change at a pivotal time in a young man's
Well,
life.
that was what I was going to ask. How was the culture different out that
It
way?
was it was such a shock, such a shock to my system at that time of life. I remember the biggest upheaval in my life before that was my father built the house we lived in, and it was a single story ranch house, and he built it and he put his own touches on it, but he built a like this wooden thing. It was in the original plans. They probably bought it out of a plan book. And it was basically this wooden planter. You would just put potted plants in the top of it. It was this big thing about the size. I don't know. It was maybe 5 feet long, 3 feet wide, 4 feet high, and it was just like this room divider. They used to do that back in the '60s. Anyway, he put that thing in, and my mother never liked it. I think she imagined it housed spiders, and it was a constant source of spider invasion. And so it also had hardwood floors. I grew up with hardwood floors. And I remember when my mother finally carpeted the house, she not only carpeted the house with pink carpeting, she had them rip that planter out. And that was the biggest, oh my God. They actually, something in my life changed, and it was that architectural element changed, and oh my God, it was a shock. And so I was not good with change.
Yeah.
But then we moved to Las Vegas, and it was like world turned upside down. It was complete, and at a weird time, when you're just really discovering the wider world. You know, I tell I tell I remember telling people in California, uh, you know, when I grew up and we would play Army, um, you were either Americans or Germans, and it really didn't matter. We didn't care whether you were American, because half the kids, in the neighborhood were probably of German descent. Um, we didn't, Japanese were fictional. I remember uh, the first time I was listening to, I think I was listening to a Lenny Bruce record, and he was talking about Jews and going on about this stuff, and I thought, Jews, and he's explaining it, and it took me a while to figure out that, wait a minute, Jews still exist. I thought they were just from Bible times.
Yeah.
It's so weird, and it was such a narrow little world that we lived in, that I lived in, and man, Las Vegas blew it wide open, let me tell you. I walked all over that town, from one end to the other
Is that when you
many
got
times.
into? Was that when you got into got the acting bug and got into
Hmm.
class out there?
Hmm. Well, in it wasn't too long after we moved there that I got my hands on my first uh, video recorder, camera. When I was little in Ohio, I had a little Super 8, that I would shoot movies and take the film to the drugstore, and I had my little editor with the little windy things on it, and I would cut movies. But then I got my hands on an actual, camcorder, and was constantly running off making movies for whoever'd watch them. Dumb things, never anything with a narrative structure or anything like that, just movies. And then one of my big career limitations has always been my inability to accept that vow of poverty necessary to really make it as an actor. And that was always the thing that held me back, was actors don't make no money. And you've really got to commit yourself, because all of the competition has committed themselves. You're not gonna skate. And so anyway, yeah, I was taking acting classes at the community drama workshop in Las Vegas, and the guy who ran that knew people from LA who were coming to Vegas to shoot movies, and so he would get us in as extras. And so I was an extra on a couple of movies. I was an extra in 1984, I believe we shot the movie. I think it came out in 86. But Christopher Lee, um, Richard Roundtree, um, Mariska Hargitay. I'm trying to think of who else was in this stupid, horrible movie. And I was just an extra, but it was fun. Oh, Tom Shadyac. I met Tom Shadyac at that movie. He had a bit part. Well, not a bit part. He had a real part, but he was really nice. He came up to me, just an extra in the movie, and you know, even back then I was, dashing.
That had to be a pretty cool. I mean, pretty cool gig just to be in. Christopher Lee.
Hmm.
That's some tall timber. Some of those names you
Hell
threw in there.
yeah, and it was a horrible, horrible movie. And I noticed that Christopher Lee never mentioned it in an interview, so I'll never mention what it was called. He was
Now
not. I'm sure he was not proud of it.
you said that your dad built what was he built a house that you guys were living in?
Yeah, yeah.
So I read that you actually ran a cabinet shop in North Hollywood. Now,
Hmm.
were you making the cabinets, or was you just the manager?
I started out in high school. I went to a vocational school,
Very good decision.
and learned architectural drafting. And I think I may have been the only one out of the class of 20 some graduates that went into the business. And I worked for contractors and architects and, different companies over the years. And yeah, it was in the mid 90s that the there were titanic shifts in the market in LA, and I just needed a job, and there was a cabinet company that needed a draftsman. And so I went and looked at what they were doing. Oh yeah, this is easy. I can do this. This is all interior stuff. And so I really got into it too, because they, when you have to actually build it, it's one thing, in architecture, the blueprints are pretty much a general guideline, and then you flesh out all the minute details, according to best practices of the people who are actually building the thing. You don't tell a carpenter too much. Although I remember I drew a set of plans for a house. It had all this structural steel in it, and when you build a steel structure, the people who are fabricating the steel, they do shop drawings that basically detail every little component of what they're going to build and how they're going to build it, and how they're going to make all the attachments and everything. And they submit the shop drawings to you, and then you make sure that, oh yeah, this is going to work with kind of what I designed. I remember the steel guy basically just photocopied my details of what I wanted and sent them back to me. That was the greatest compliment I ever got. But anyway, I really got into the detail and started focusing on interiors, and eventually it was I probably worked there for 10 years, and eventually ended up managing, general manager.
That's
And
pretty
then
cool, man. That's
yeah,
when
and,
you when
and
you
then I
said
got sick of it.
when you said that your dad had built that, I was like, I dug around a little bit here, and Dan was running a cabinet shop in North Hollywood. It must have been a kind of a family thing. Y'all must have been pretty good with your hands and stuff, dude.
Oh yeah, yeah. I always enjoyed making stuff.
And I had read that before we get into Chainsaw. If you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed like
Oh, I
in one of
will.
your really early interviews about the movie, you had said that you had got a VCR when you were tiny, and you had two VHS. One was Eraserhead, and the
Mhm.
other was Texas Chainsaw
That
Massacre.
that is true.
So would that be your first? Was that the first time you were introduced to the franchise when you were that young?
Um, no, that was after high school. I'm older. This was, yeah. I saw the movie I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1981 at the drive-in in Vegas with all my buddies from high school,
Man, I bet that was
and
an
didn't get
absolute.
a we VCRs were still in the thousands of dollars, and we
Oh
were
yeah.
we were not affluent people. And so yeah, it wasn't until they came down in price, that we could get one. But when we did, man, yeah, I went out and bought two tapes that I wanted.
You couldn't pick two better ones. Eraserhead's a wild movie too, man. It's out there. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a trip.
Yeah, I've got it on Blu-ray now. So
So how let's just break wide open here, man. How did you get involved with Texas Chainsaw 3D? It's after the Platinum Dunes films. They've wiped the slate clean. They're going in a different direction. How did it all come about for you?
Well, actually, Frank Tamarello was directing a TV pilot. Basically, this school I was attending to learn on-camera acting technique. They were trying to build a reality TV show around it. And so I got involved in that and started helping them because, good with my hands,
Right.
I can build sets and I just know how to figure out problems. And, when you're, I became friends with all these people. And so when your friends have a project they're working on, you jump in and help. That's just the way the business works. It's not always just business. It's, there's a lot of charity involved. And one of the people involved knew Carl Mazzacone, who would eventually produce Texas Chainsaw 3D. And so he asked him if he would come in and make a little cameo appearance in one of our little situations. And so Carl came down to the studio we were working out of, and he was real cool. We hung out, and he realized right away that he and I had a lot in common, and was able to overcome his fear of actors, to where we could hang out and whatnot. And it was he got wind that I did all this construction stuff, and he had some problem with some cabinets in his house, I think. And that's where it started. I said, "Oh, man, it's easy. Let me make a phone call for that. I'll get that taken care of." And so, that, I think that endeared me to him. And then we just kept going. We found another project to work on together. Basically, we wanted to restore this 100-year-old motor yacht, a 75-foot wooden motor yacht that was sinking in LA Harbor. And we were going to try and restore it and do a reality TV show about that. And it was a whole thing. Anyway, none of it ever came to anything, but we became friends. And so we hung out a lot and had a good time. And, he, at that time, was working on obtaining the rights to Texas Chainsaw. Before that, he had worked at Twisted Pictures.
They were responsible for Saw, weren't they?
Yeah, they had, done the ultimate franchise treatment on Saw, and made more money than anybody ever thought possible with a horror franchise. And so that was his pitch to Toby and Kim, was that, I want to take this horribly mismanaged franchise you have here and do this with it. And so he had the rights to make 6 movies. Well, I don't know any of the bloody details of film finance as regards Texas Chainsaw, but I imagine there's a lot of kind of backroom, backhand dealing and whatnot. And he ended up having to go to Millennium for financing. I'll try and fix my camera.
Oh, you're fine, my man.
Oh, no, I got to fix it. There. I'm framed. Sorry about that, folks.
Oh, you're good, dude.
But anyway, Millennium Studios ended up writing a check, and I will tell you, it was a great deal for Millennium Studios, and why nobody else would write the check, I have no idea. But they basically, for for writing the check to shoot the movie, they wanted all foreign rights, so everything but North America, which they got, and they proceeded to pre-sell the rights to Texas Chainsaw 3D around the world and made back their money. So the movie was in profit before we shot it.
It opened at #1 also.
And then, it opened #1, which caught everybody by surprise, because we were originally supposed to open in October of 2012. It seemed like a Halloween season movie, but Lionsgate bought some other studio, the studio that produced, I believe it was Sinister. I think they produced Sinister, and they were basically contractually obligated to release Sinister. The deadline for Sinister was before Texas Chainsaw 3D, so basically they gave Sinister our release date, because they didn't want their movies competing with each other. And so anyway, they threw us into the first weekend in January, which is supposed death
dump
for a horror movie. And so it opened #1, against other big 3D movies. I forget what the other 3D movies were. There were a couple, in theaters at the time, and so anyway, Lionsgate was caught flat-footed. Normally, they would have had a huge second week marketing push. When you get a #1 movie, you open the taps and tell the world, but they had no money left, and so it set records for second week fall off as for audience share, and it didn't make as much money as it should have, but it was a good movie, and it made money.
It's one of the most fun of the franchise. I mean, like the setting I thought was good. I thought Shreveport done a wonderful job as a Dublin for Texas. I liked.
It is East Texas.
Yeah, it's right there basically, and it was just, to me, that movie had one of the best openings to a Texas Chainsaw or a horror film that I'd watched in so long. That opening, the cameo by Gunner, Bill Moseley, and you had the guy that played, I think it was Bear Sawyer, just passed away. God rest his soul here recently. Man, he was a big mountain of a man, and you just hate to see that.
Yeah, he was. It's funny. I remember. I was thinking about him a lot, especially since he passed. I thought about Bear all the time, though. A mutual friend of ours posted he was everybody's favorite. He was just that kind of guy. Everybody loved that man, and you hear that a lot after people die.
Yeah.
They were they were the sweetest. Which is is kind of if you want to live long, be a jerk. Apparently, it takes a toll being nice, because the good ones seem to die. But in his case, it was actually true. And I probably spent no more than 30 hours in his company. But yeah, he was just that kind of guy. He loved everybody. He had the biggest heart. He was so kind, and and everybody, like I say, he was a Teamster driver. He wasn't an actor. He was a Teamster driver, but everybody who met him loved him so much. And the way movie producers show their love is they put you in their movie.
Yeah.
And that was how he ended up in the movie. He was just a great human being. And that's a good lesson to anybody who wants to break into the movies. Be nice. Just be a nice person.
Sometimes being
There's
nice does
something
pay
for
off.
you to do.
That's it, man. And
But
he fit the bill too. He looked
genuinely
like, I mean, he favored a young Gunnar Hansen, the big beard, the big burly look, and so it kind of went together with the family there in
he
the
was
opening.
family. Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing, Gunnar Hansen. I mean, you guys. I mean, it was a bond because I watched the behind the scenes. You talked a little bit about it years back with me. You and Gunnar Hansen hit it off, and you were so respectful to him. You paid tribute to him like nobody else has. And it really melted my heart because Gunnar would end up passing a few years later.
Yeah.
But I always felt like I don't know, man. I always felt like he kind of didn't get the credit he deserved from some of the Chainsaw films and stuff. And to have you, I mean, you blankly just say, man, thank you basically for allowing me to do this. And he was almost in tears. I mean, and it was just so cool to see that as a fan.
Well, and that was the entire mission of the movie, though. We needed to try and save the franchise. We needed to touch the original again and then move forward. It was that, and it was an homage, definitely. We opened with film from the original movie. Those sequences were the actual original movie, and then we rebuilt that house.
God, that was awesome.
Just down to studs. That was a real house. That was where Gunnar and I met for the first time.
And
was
he even
in
slams
that
the
house.
door.
And then we burnt the fucker to the ground.
Did you get to spend a lot of time at that house, Dan?
A couple hours, really. The whole time they were burning it to the ground, I was there that afternoon, and that took about, I don't know, until well after dark. Those scenes that they're sifting through the cinders, that was the actual remnants of the house. That wasn't some stage thing. And you can see, if you watch that scene, you can see all the pipes that, every house has pipes. Well, those were all the pipes for the propane tanks that fed through the entire house to make it, go up in flames like that.
Wow, there's something for somebody to look
Plus,
for.
it was just wood framing, and they tore a lot of the drywall that they had put up. They tore a lot of that out before they lit it on fire so that it would go up fast. And then they had the propane accelerants.
They had Sam McKenzie play the 74 version. Why did they do that? Because he wasn't really in it too awful long. I thought you could have probably slid right into that.
That was the original plan. However, there were some conflicts early on. In the first week of shooting, they fell behind a couple of days. And I think by the second week, John and the DP were making noise about needing some extra days. And extra days are money. And nobody had any that they were willing to, nobody was going to take a pay cut to do this. It was already, we were shooting a movie in 3D. I think the final production budget was in the, 11 or $12 million range. And that's unheard of. You show me another number one 3D movie shot for under 30 million, I'll be surprised. And so anyway, that was just impossible. And so they started racking their brains. How are they going to fix this? And part of the big cost was, they I think who was it? Um, Somebody was shooting a big movie in Australia, and basically they had every 3D camera rig in the world.
God.
And they had like 50 of these rigs, and they're the best, and they're all handmade, magnesium things that are these elaborate camera systems. And our camera guy, our 3D guy, was able to get his hands on two of them. So we had two camera rigs, which is four cameras. And they were really expensive. All that equipment and all those people for, doing this stuff were really expensive. And so they made some quick producer calculations and decided they could afford 2 weeks of a second unit by cutting 4 days off the schedule. And so we went from 32 to 28 shooting days. And they took those 4 days and got 2 extra weeks of second unit. So basically, one 12-hour shift, these folks would be working on this, and then they'd move all the equipment over, and then another 12-hour shift would take place of different people working on different stuff. And so, like when they were shooting the destruction of the Sawyer house, I was shooting that scene where I was cutting a hole in the coffin with Heather hiding in it. And so I couldn't be in both places,
Right.
You can't, and that was, they talked themselves into it. Yeah, we can find somebody, we'd like them to look younger anyway, and to be able to sell that, yeah, you're old, Leatherface, And so anyway, they found this local actor, Sam McKenzie, and I thought he did a great job.
I did too.
I thought he was, he nailed it, he had that manic
Sympathetic
timidity that by the time I get the character, all that is gone, because by that time he's witnessed his family slaughtered and people proud of it, and the hate and rage that built up over those years, as he plotted his revenge. Yeah, it's so anyway, I thought it was probably a smart cinematic choice, to show, at least, to amplify that change, in the movie. And it worked. And like I say, he was such a nice guy. I was sorry I never got to spend more time with him, because he was really, I met him at a convention, signing autographs and stuff. And yeah, he was just a really nice guy.
That's where I met him at Days of the Dead in 2012. It was like one of the last Texas Chainsaw Massacre reunions they had got a chance to do. And it was right before. And I talked to Gunner about the movie, and Marilyn she was loving it, man. She was really proud of it. She was telling us, I can't say too much, but they told me to promote the hell out of it. That's what they told me to do. And Sam was there also. It was a really cool moment. John Dugan, got to talk to John, and it was really cool. And that was one of the best. I felt really blessed because I got to meet Gunner. I got to sit down and just talk to Gunner. Like, I was about like me and you just sitting here talking. You guys are a lot alike. It's really. It goes.
Well, I take that as a compliment.
Oh, it's a huge compliment. You guys are really intelligent. I mean, sophisticated. It's just.
He's much better educated than I ever was.
He was a
I always felt intimidated by that with him.
Oh, well, let me tell you, I sit down and I even told him, I was like, man, I don't want to aggravate you, because I'd walked away and my wife's like, Adam, go over and talk to him. I was like, there's a picture she got of me, like just leaned over, and I didn't even know she had taken it. And I'm just like, kneeled down beside of him talking. And I was like, man, I'm sorry to aggravate you. He said, no, no. He said, stay here as long as you want. I enjoyed it.
He loved fans. I mean, that was why he did it. He didn't have to go sign autographs, No, and I don't know. There are probably a few people who, it's a significant part of their, their income in the
Right.
year is to do horror cons. But he didn't, he probably made more money off of books than he did off of horror cons. And
yeah, I think it
although
was right when he done the Chainsaw Confidential book. I think that was right when he was releasing it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But he was just such a sweet human being, man. I mean, and he would talk to you as long as you wanted. And the same thing with R.A. Mihailoff. I've got to be really, and he speaks highly of you all. So does Brett. Everybody loves Dan Yeager. All the guys, I guess.
Well, that's good to know.
They all think the world of him.
I'd hate to be in love with all those men and they didn't like me.
But the RA,
they are good. Actually, it's surprising what a sophisticated and intellectual lot the Leatherface alumni are. All those guys. Bill Johnson, brilliant people. I'm kind of the dumb one.
I don't know that I would say that, my man, because I'll tell you, whatever beard oil you're using, do you use beard oil or beard butter?
I just pet it down.
Just a good comb.
Try and keep it under control.
Man, it looks killer. I just actually went over mine with a 3-guard. It was pretty long.
It gets wild sometimes. It's heading that way. I may do a Psycho Santa this year. So we'll see.
Yeah, mine, I use a little bit of the bourbon. I think it's the bourbon vanilla. I think shampoo and conditioner I put on mine. Try to keep it somewhat tamed, but enough about my beard, man. Like I said, I was telling you, the setting of that film was so awesome. The mansion, and I'd say you got to spend some time with a pretty good amount of time with Marilyn Burns, because there was a scene that you were carrying her out to her coffin, and I thought that was so awesome, man.
Yeah, it was. It's a shame that didn't
make the cut.
It couldn't make it into the movie, because after it was in the script, and we shot the whole thing, but in the edit room they realized, oh no, this don't work at all. And basically, at the end of the movie, Heather, is supposed to, take over the reins of Grandma, and you see just a little sliver of it. You basically see Leatherface, tamping the dirt back on Grandma's grave, and that's all you get. Well, we shot the entire sequence from carrying her corpse out of down the steps of the mansion. And I remember doing that. I had to think back to my grade school balance beam technique of feeling the ground to know when I could step back, because I couldn't see. I was not only carrying this treasure in my arms, that mask is just was not made for safe. Anyway, I was scared to death, and I said, oh please, watch closely. If you see me start to fall, you run for me. Don't let me drop this woman. and I didn't, though. I made it the whole way. And anyway, carried her over to the open coffin in the ground, and laid her down in it, and took a cue from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where Leatherface brings Grandpa down to the dinner table, and he pats him on the head and he kisses him. And
Man, that's
so I
awesome.
kissed grandma on the head and laid her down into that coffin and closed the lid. And with Marilyn Burns inside this fucking coffin, I started shoveling dirt on top of it. And then they cut for the next shot. And we kind of realized at that point that, you know, this was going to be tough because there was not a dry eye on set. You know,
Oh yeah.
it was so sad. And, you know, just general rule, if you're going to make a Texas Chainsaw movie, you know, don't let the audience go out of the theater crying. You know,
Don't tug at
that's
the
not what you
heartstrings too
want.
much.
Yeah, you can overdo that. You know, you need to build some sympathy for the characters, but don't, you know, that only goes so far. And then you lose them for the sequel. And so anyway, that was why it couldn't be used. It was just so tragic. And bless Marilyn Burns's heart for being able to do that. We tried rehearsing that. I tried rehearsing it with a friend of mine the night before, and they were shooting in the mansion, which was right there. And so I had my friend Penny playing grandma, and I put her down into the thing and went to close the lid on the coffin, and she screamed so loud it scared the hell out of her having that coffin lid closed. They had to call cut. They were shooting something. They heard this scream. So anyway, I apologize to the other actors.
Man, that Leatherface's lair, that was another thing that kind of I thought was really cool about that.
Mm-hmm.
The way you cut the cop's face off and you kind of got a little jig going and you're doing
Mm-hmm.
the, I mean, just the cool, I mean, that's so, nobody else done that. That was so good, man. And you could tell you drew inspiration from Gunner, the way you done the tongue, the teeth, I mean, the facial, I mean, it was just
Yeah,
awesome.
you know, everything that entire characterization, you know, started with Gunner, and I think, and that was the mission of the movie. You
You
know,
accomplished it,
that
man.
wasn't my personal goal. I mean, I liked it. I certainly supported it and encouraged it wherever I could, because there were a few elements where we would stray from that, and I was, you know, let's bring it back to, you know, what we're trying to do here rather than just, you know, get a cheap scare.
Another
Uh,
scene that I really liked a lot, and it didn't. I mean, there's a scene where if you're not paying a lot of attention, you've got a like a lady's robe on,
mhm.
and you're putting the mask on, and I'm like, they should have touched on that a
Oh,
little
we
bit.
did. They chose to leave it out of the movie.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the producer, he hated it. He thought, "Oh no, no, this isn't," because he had his eye on making five more of these movies, and
Yeah.
he knew if they opened that can of worms, it was going to become an element in the rest of the franchise, and that just wasn't in where he saw this going. That whole, uh, you know, cross-dressing, you know,
Alternate personality type.
yeah, yeah. That whole element of the, you know,
What did you think
which
about the
was
idea, Dan? Was you for that? Did you kind of find it interesting?
um yeah, I think it's a genuine part element, certainly of the reason for the mask. It becomes a much deeper in the original, you know, in the original movie, you know, Leatherface had several personalities, and in our movie he really only had two. He was kind of, you know, content to live in grandma's basement, and, you know, and you know, always harbored this seething rage, and then that seething rage burst out, and that was the other character. But they were both definitely, you know, male in nature. um and I think grandma grandma took over the role of the woman in his life. Uh, and then Heather was going to. So there, you know, as the character evolved, you know, I think that's still there, but it's not. It's no longer essential to telling, you know, who he is.
Yeah.
Because he's still, you know, he's not transgender. Um, in any rational sense, you know, it's a different psychology, and I don't know enough about psychology to really explain it, so I probably shouldn't try.
Right.
Um,
But it's a small
there's
part
a
of
lot
him.
to it. Yeah, it
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
bother me. You know, I mean, it's definitely part of the original story. You know, and all the source material. You know, the whole Ed Gein uh, uh, mythos, and you know, yeah, it's that kind of. It's. I don't think it's really. It's more split personality than gender identity. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. It would have been great to see where they were going to take this story. It was a shame. There was a big fight, you know, within the production after, you know, after the success of 3D, um, what they should do next. And the idea was, of course, you know, pick up from where they left off in 3D. But there was a power struggle, and one camp wanted to do the prequel. They thought that was a good idea. And of course, it turned out that was not a good idea.
That was. I don't even. You know, I hate to say this, but I honestly don't even consider that part of the franchise.
No, it seems to be ignored. It's kind of a shame. Um, you know, I read that they sent me that script, though I was completely cut out of it. They sent it to me anyway for some reason. And I remember I sent an email back. I said, I have two questions. Um, why are you making a movie called Leatherface where no one wears a mask? And why are you calling it part of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when nobody has a chainsaw? There was not a chainsaw in the original script. They had to kind of shoehorn that in.
You can tell it's rushed. I mean,
And you know, apparently, you know, they shot it in Bulgaria, which was a cynical, money motivated move. You just can't do it. I remember when they released some production stills. I swear to God, one of those cop cars was a Russian make vehicle. And you know, it just you just can't fake. I mean, doing Texas in you know, northern Louisiana was to me a push,
yeah.
but doing it in Bulgaria just is not.
Well, I
And
mean, even with the cook and the hitchhiker, it
mhm,
was so they weren't American. You could tell they weren't American.
mhm,
It was hard to invest in those characters when
yeah.
it's sad. I mean, nothing against the actors or anything.
Oh
I mean,
no, no.
but it was just you could just tell, man. I was so downhearted, and you know, I don't know what's going on in the Michael Myers world at the moment, but a lot of people apparently feel the way about it than I feel about that movie at the moment. But
Yeah.
and it's a shame because you've done such a wonderful job. I left
Well, I
the
thought, you know, there you watch the credits for that movie, and there's a couple hundred people who all did a wonderful job. You
Oh
know,
gosh,
that
it was awesome, man. I
yeah,
mean, it was a top.
it was a labor of love too. I mean, everybody. I haven't worked on a ton of projects, but that was an amazing effort on the part of everybody involved. No one person deserves credit or blame
Oh
for
no.
anything in that movie. We all put everything we had into it, and
That was Alexandra Daddario. One of her, she's one of Hollywood's leading ladies at the moment. I mean, she's been in a lot of stuff. That was one of her first gigs right there. I mean,
yeah,
Scott Eastwood.
they had her for two more movies if they
Man,
wanted her, and
that,
they chose not to. And that was, I don't know all the details of how those decisions were made, but
well, I always said to
I
myself,
do know they, in hindsight, they were poor decisions. Yeah, when they shot the movie, the 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 sequel or the prequel, they came back, and the reason they lost the rights to the franchise is they came back a year later and screened what they had for Lionsgate, and Lionsgate said they wouldn't release it.
went straight to direct TV.
Yeah. And so anyway, they sent him back to Bulgaria to try again. So it took them an extra year, and that's why they lost the rights. Because they have to release the movies. They fought for a year after 3D was released, wasted all that time, and then they shot a crap movie. Wasted all that time, and by that time they lost the rights. So, you know,
That's just a tragic situation for us because I left Pikeville, Kentucky cinema very happy with Chainsaw 3D. I
mm-hmm,
love the credits rolling, the song cuts to the bone, man.
mm-hmm.
I left that movie feeling like, that was fun, man. That was
Like
just
we wanted you to.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it was all by design.
And
Movie magic.
it was number one for a reason that week, ain't no doubt. And like
Yeah,
you said, it makes perfect sense why it kind of fell off when they just didn't have the funds to promote it as much in the following.
yeah, because all the diehard fans, show
They were
up
there that
opening
night.
weekend. Yeah, and Trey Songz deserves enormous credit for the success of that opening weekend. I mean, people wanted to see him. That was a
Yeah.
brilliant, choice. And people criticize his work in that movie, and I thought he had moments of brilliance. To me, there are just a couple of moments, and you can tell Lessenhop, who he
Mhm.
directed and cut the movie. You can tell how much he liked Trey Songz in that movie. He cut that, gave
I
him.
thought
I mean,
that, nothing about Trey Songz.
they found gold in his
They
performance.
did. It was wonderful casting. I mean, none of the characters were. Everybody did their job and did it well, and
Mhm.
it's something that I look back on as one of my favorite installments. Like you got 74 for me. It's 74. Part 3 is like one of my favorites. A lot of people don't care much for Part 3, but I
I
personally
love the most maligned one, I think, is the Next Generation, and I even enjoy
I
that.
do too. I
And
found love for it.
if you can't, if you can't go into a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie and ready to laugh, you probably shouldn't go. There there there's mental illness afoot. I think if you can't laugh at this ridiculous scenario, that talking to Toby Hooper, he said, I think he later said it in one of the interviews for our movie, but uh, he said, one of his motivations for Texas Chainsaw 2 was that nobody got the jokes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, I'd
You
seen
know,
that.
and I remember laughing my ass off at Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There are just some priceless moments. You know, Jim Seedow
Yes.
was just, you know, his whole thing about it being a, you know, uh, 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 put upon, you know, businessman trying to make a living. You know, oh my God, he was hilarious.
Yes, he
You
deserved.
know,
I mean,
and the Hitchhiker is just comedy gold. And you know, my God,
Ed Neal did such a wonderful job
yeah.
as the hitchhiker. I mean, I would have loved to see him, and if he would have been in Chainsaw 3D also, I mean, you would have about had the entire thing. You know,
Yeah, well, I think they tried to get everybody. They tried to get Terry McMinn and Ed, and I'm not sure how it all shook out. Um, but yeah, I remember them. You know, I was in a few of the pre-production meetings, but yeah, there was an effort to get everybody they could. You know, kind of make it a real, you know,
reunion of
reunion
family
homage.
reunion.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, we've talked Chainsaw for a while. I don't want to keep you on here much longer. I cannot thank you enough for your time, but
A little of me goes a long way, Adam.
well, you know what? It's went a real long way. But another thing of yours that I was really impressed with that I haven't heard a lot about lately was Slaughter Farm.
Oh yeah, well, you know, I don't know. I've I've kind of, you know, I moved to rural New York and I've slowed down quite a bit. I'm not pushing stuff the way I used to, and it really, you know, it really does take uh, probably more energy than I have left to produce a movie. Um, so you know, I'm still shopping it, trying to find somebody who wants to make it. It's a good story, and its time had come and gone and come again a couple of times since I've written it, you know, which was years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've got a few scripts I've been trying to, you know, I put them out there to people every now and then, and some people, you know, actually we got some friends down in Florida who've been talking about shooting some stuff, and we may do something with them. We may do Slaughter Farm or possibly Zombie Bear Attack.
Either one of those sound right down my
Yeah,
alley.
and they're both fun movies. Uh, Slaughter Farm is more of a franchise and would probably cost a bit more to make. Um, I don't know. I gotta work on them more. I get lazy. I start writing and kind of get lost in my own thoughts, and you know, months can go by and I've achieved very little. So
Well, I'm the same way. I know exactly
yeah.
where you're coming
No,
from.
you got your podcast going.
I'm trying.
You're
I'm
a go
trying.
getter.
Actually, it's really weird because the MM. I don't know if you're familiar with mixed martial arts, but I've been able to reach out to a lot of the older guys that had just started, and they're like really welcoming and wanting to do it. And a lot of my views have came from those, and it's kind of took off a little bit.
Yeah,
But it's been a blast just getting to talk to a lot of the people that influenced me in the wrestling ring and the podcast world and in everything I do.
yeah.
But
Oh, actually, I would, before we go, I would like to thank you for always being so nice to my mom.
I, Motherface was an
Hmm.
absolute angel. Listen,
She sure enjoyed you.
she was a sweetheart,
She
and
was.
I don't know. Sometimes you just you connect with people, and
Hmm.
I seen a lot of my own grandmother and her. I felt like
Uh-huh.
conversing, and she was just so sweet. She'd always comment on my son's pictures, and I got to know her through that. And I can remember her messaging me and saying,
Yeah.
"Hey Adam, would you like me to get Dan to send you a picture?" And I'm like, "Oh really?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she's like, I came home from work one day and Max was on the porch with some pictures and some cool
Wow.
stuff from the set. And I was like, "Wow, man." That woman was an angel.
Yeah,
The
she was.
picture of you behind her with, I think you had a meat cleaver. I was just like, that's perfect, dude.
All right.
You need that
Yeah,
up in a frame.
she takes credit for, spotting my talent when she bought me that Superman costume when I was 3. So
If I'm not mistaken, she told me how big you were when you were born, and I can't really remember, but she said you were a huge baby.
I was 2 feet tall when I was born, and 11 pounds 11 ounces.
See, man, that
11,
is
11.
born on New Year's, right?
No,
You
that's a
weren't
myth. That's a myth.
a myth,
I,
a
I, don't, I don't
legend.
I don't put my real birthday online.
Oh, okay.
Um, until they stop using your date of birth as an identity to access your bank account crap.
Oh gosh, I've been
Yeah,
hacked on Facebook
yeah,
twice.
it's just something I don't even
Very
talk about.
smart move, Dan. Very smart
Yeah.
move.
So, yeah, happy New Year anyway.
And before we get off here, I have a few fast questions for fast answers, kind of deal, just people to get to know you.
Okay.
And the first one would be, what's your favorite horror film ever?
Favorite horror film ever? Oh, that's a tough one. Crap. Sorry about not being fast.
Oh, you're fine,
I
dude. You
would
take.
have to say either Bride of Frankenstein or, oh man, there's so many. Wizard of Oz. Does that count?
That scared me as a kid.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was terrifying.
Those
But there's,
monkeys.
I don't think there's a cemetery in that. And so it's not really a horror movie. Um, which was Toby Hooper's rule. It wasn't mine.
Wow.
I had to have a cemetery or it wasn't a horror movie. So yeah, probably Bride of Frankenstein. I'll go with that.
Bride of Frankenstein.
Mhm.
Favorite band or musician?
Favorite band that changes all the time. Um, Probably my favorite composer would either be Gustav Mahler or Guillaume de Machaut.
Whoa. We'll have to download them immediately and give those a listen.
Yeah, well, Machaut was 15th century, medieval French polyphony. Um, but yeah, he was brilliant. And Mahler. I mean, Mahler kind of wrote the soundtrack to every emotional experience I ever had.
I'll tell you, man, this next question, I feel like you almost answered it, but who would be your favorite universal monster? Like, am I going to say, would Frankenstein be there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the one. I heard Universal was going to make another Frankenstein, and I called everybody I knew, said, "Oh, I want to play that.
Yeah.
I'm big. I could play that." Frankenstein was big,
I think you would make an excellent Frankenstein or a
but
history teacher.
I never got anywhere with it. I called yeah, every producer I knew, but they never came through for me. So
So you just basically answered my next question, which was, besides Leatherface, which horror icon would you like to play?
how did I predict that? That's pretty good. Yeah, no, Frankenstein was one. Um, yeah, he certainly has, as an actor, you like something with some emotional depth.
Sink your teeth into.
Yeah, there's not a lot of internal dialogue to, a lot of these characters. They're just, it's like playing the shark in Jaws. It's yeah. They're they're somewhat one dimensional, and I never, I never got too intrigued as an actor by the the unkillable ones.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that no matter what you did, they were always going to come after you. I like the ones that, you know, have a little, that have to
Mortality.
run away every now and then, you know.
The last question is one that I have been able to ask guys that have donned the mask and chainsaw, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty fun question. It goes like this. So you get to make an all-star Texas Chainsaw Massacre family around your version of Leatherface, and you get to pick 4 characters from the whole franchise. But this is your Leatherface, and you get to make an all-star family. So 4 from the whole franchise. Who would you select?
Hmm. Hmm. In addition to Leatherface.
Yes, this is Dan Yeager, Leatherface, and for example, a brother of Viggo Mortensen in Chainsaw 3, or Edwin Neal, and or Sheriff Hoyt, anybody that was in a Texas Chainsaw. You've got 4
Yeah.
other characters.
Well, you know, I actually read a draft of a script that followed our movie, and I would have loved to make that movie. It was, you know, Heather comes back. Um, uh, it would be nice, you know, but if I go that route, we already killed off all my favorites, which is the rage that drives Leatherface. So that doesn't work. Um, yeah, that's yeah. I wonder, is there anybody we could reprise from
Yeah,
some
yeah.
some of the other ones? That's a good question. I have to look into that. Think about it. Because in this script they wrote, you know, basically Bert Hartman's brother is is you know, kind of the mean version of Bert Hartman, and he comes back to town to see what the hell, you know,
So that
how
was what was
how
being
how,
planned.
how in the hell did you know, all this shit happen? And he was gonna seek his revenge now, and it had a, a bunch of a bunch of interesting twists. But at that point in the scenario, you know, to ensure that, you know, the Sawyer line continues, you know, Leatherface is the only one left,
Yeah,
so he would need to have a son.
that could be cool.
And while Edith Rose is his cousin, you know, I think that flies in East Texas. I'm not sure. I
Oh
I've
yeah,
been there in a few years, but
does in Kentucky.
does it? All right. Probably here in New York too, but I don't know.
I'd say in every part of the
Yeah,
world.
no, wait, there's got to be, you know, yeah, it's kind of a shame the truck driver from the original got, you know, he
Met
didn't
his
make it.
demise.
Yeah, he would have been a good one to bring back. Um, yeah, yeah, they kill so many of the good ones. That's a tough one, but definitely Heather or Edith Rose is coming
Yeah,
back in my movie. Um, that cop she actually likes, you know, he gonna have to come back so I can kill him.
Scott Eastwood's character.
Yeah,
He was his name Carl Hartman, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah, I tell you, man, that was a. It's been a heck of a night, Dan. And you look like you're cozied up good up in New York right now. And
Yeah, I'm happy.
I think we're going to get up early in the morning and head back in the hills. So I'm going to let you get your rest, and I'm going to try to get mine also.
Well, thank you, Adam. It's been a lot of fun.
Man, we need to do it again on down the road. It's like I said, it's been October. I've been really fortunate to have a lot of cool horror guests. None come any cooler. I've been wanting to do this for a long, long time, actually. Like,
I'm glad we finally got to it.
yeah, you know what? And hopefully I'll run into you on down the road because need to get together and smoke a cigar or something.
Hell yeah.
But listen, if there's anything you'd like to plug, dude, any appearances or anything, feel free to do it.
No, I'm like I say, I'm laying low these days. I'm not doing much. I'm working on some little stuff I may release online at some point. You know, little stuff. Oh, I'm doing I would like to plug this one project I'm working on with my buddy Ron Scott and a new friend, Patrick Sargent. He's producing it. It's a podcast called Unsolved Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh.
Beautiful little town, great little town. I've been there. They used to have a great horror con there called Rock and Shock, and it was one of the best. And they stopped doing it for some reason. And that was my I loved Worcester. And anyway, Ron called me up and asked me if I wanted to narrate this podcast. And it's about all of there's a shocking number of unsolved homicides and missing persons cases in Worcester, Massachusetts. And it's very focused and Pat has a journalism background and he writes the whole thing and we just go through these stories. It's called Unsolved Worcester, unsolvedworcester.com. Right, it's on Apple. The first episode will drop October 18th, which is next week, I believe. And there'll be an episode every Tuesday and Thursday, like a half hour, but really compelling stories that we hope it's mainly targeted at the kind of Boston area, locally, but with the internet anybody has access, and people in this day and age move. So you never know who's gonna hear this and say, wait a minute, if there's just a glimmer of a chance that
something gets figured out,
we could find some answers for these. Some of some of these stories are just heartbreaking, and it's an ordeal to go through them, but I think it's worth it, the team working on it is doing a first class job. It should be interesting. I hope people listen. And you can find it anywhere you find podcasts. It's iTunes, Spotify, all those things.
As soon as it drops, I will share it and make sure everybody that is on, I come in contact with, gives it a listen. And thank you so much again, Dan, for giving me some of your time, dude. And
my pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Always, man. I love it. Love being able to shoot the breeze with you. And I'd like to tell everybody, listen, if you have not yet, go subscribe, go like, share this, and give Dan Leatherface Yeager, the son of Clarissa Yeager, a huge round of applause. And thank you for being on a Wild Time podcast, big man.
My pleasure. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Take care.
Bye now.